Hello and welcome to session 1 of this short course, and in this session we're basically going to be having a quick introduction, really top level, to Google Analytics 4, kind of answering the question of what is GA4 and why is it so important. Now, throughout this short course I'm joined by Rachel from the Mediaworks team, and I think that in order for the learners to get to know you a little bit better, just for you to provide a quick introduction, tell us about what you do at Mediaworks, what your role is, etc.
Yeah, so my name is Rachel McGuigan. I'm Head of Data and Insights at Mediaworks. My day-to-day role is heavily involved in utilising Google Analytics as a platform to feed data across the rest of the services that we do. So I spend a lot of time in the platform itself, but we kind of sort of help from the very start in terms of the tracking of a campaign all the way through to the reporting on it at the end. So we kind of do all touch points throughout the journey there. I've been here for around 7 years now, and kind of went from a data analyst to head up the team.
In terms of data then, it's a conversation which is massive in digital marketing at the moment, the importance of data, especially with, the reason why we created this short course, in fact, was the introduction of Google Analytics 4, and there's been a lot of conversation around the importance of its introduction, what it means for digital marketers, what it means for data. But just to take a step back for a moment, because I'm quite conscious that we might have learners who live within the current iteration of Google Analytics and use data on a day-to-day basis, but we'll also have learners who've never used Google Analytics before, they've never had to use data in real depth within their role. So from your point of view, when it comes to data, how important is that when it comes to the digital marketing activity of an organization?
Yeah, I think it probably feels more important now than ever before. I think the way the industry's going, the kind of conversations that you hear online, people kind of always put data at the forefront of that. And then kind of cost of living keeps coming up recently, and people are thinking about cutting back budgets here, there and everywhere. You have to need to know, how do you know where to start that? Where's the most important thing? And I think really data unlocks a lot of questions. It doesn't maybe necessarily unlock lots of answers. It kind of gives you somewhere to go and investigate next and keep investigating. And it's like that kind of endless cycle of asking it a question, finding out something, and then going to do something else. I think the other thing is data doesn't live in one place. So this short course focuses completely on Google Analytics 4 in this new world, but actually lots of digital platforms have their own sets of data. So it's like one pot feeds into the next to kind of go around and answer those questions for you. So I think it's really important because it empowers you to make important business decisions. And ultimately, I think a lot of people want to have data-backed decisions rather than just gut feel or kind of challenging assumptions that people might already think about their business or think that they know about their business.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point as well, because when we think about digital marketing, there's so many disciplines within this field now, and it looks like that's not going to slow down. We're going to see more and more breakdowns of particular roles or functions within digital marketing. So for you at Mediaworks, with such an extensive team and offering all of these services, do you work closely with the various teams and how does that relationship work exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of sit alongside every team. It's like part and parcel of a service that you do with us comes with data at the forefront of that as well. So we work alongside every team to support them in getting the right visibility. It's a hybrid world of there's not just one pot that the data comes from. It comes from multiple different platforms. We also look at how you can kind of take that offline as well. So, for a client, how do you start utilizing their first party data, whether that's their CRM system or just any lead generation information that they have, or if it is a lead gen website, how do we start to track that offline? Or even with some clients, how do we estimate footfall tracking, for example? So there's a lot that you have to do. There's not one pot of data, and it's important, especially from a client's perspective, that it all lives together nicely and kind of ties together to sort of tell a story almost. The data needs to tell some form of story to them. So it is a lot of collaboration between the teams because ultimately we all have different pots of data and it's trying to figure out how we get to the visibility that we need. How do we know if we're doing a good job? How can we prove what what we should be doing, and then also opportunity for continual improvement as well. So there's a lot that has to go into getting to where we are in terms of whether that's a report or, you know, like a presentation or whatever it is that we do. There's a lot that has to go into that.
Before we focus on GA4 in particular then, and the way that we structured this short course is to do a deep dive into GA4, looking at its functionality, its features, etc. I think it's important to consider Google Analytics as it exists, so kind of the previous/current iteration. So for you, as somebody who lives within data, within digital marketing, what has Google Analytics enabled you to be able to do?
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, Google Analytics is a web analytics platform. It's the most commonly used, although there are others available. And the reason why is because for most people, they use the free account, which houses a lot of information. I think the reason that it's so powerful is because it tries to put all as much data as it can in one place. So there's never ever going to exist one single source of truth for a client, but it goes a really long way to try and help. And I think that's the bit that differentiates it. A lot of kind of people will approach it from a channel specific view, but actually ultimately you're thinking about that whole business objective, and that's where Google Analytics tries to bring everything together, show you the journeys and show you how different channels interact with each other. And I think that's where it can be a really powerful tool. And the fact that it's free really helps that, because it gives businesses so many predefined reports at almost quick installation. And it's like very, you know, from a marketer perspective, you don't need a lot of skills to get it up and running. It's quite a quick thing. From a development perspective, you can own it. It doesn't have to go into that cycle of raising tickets for support, waiting for it to be put into a sprint, etc. It is quite a quick thing to get up and running, and then it really empowers you as a business with so many preset reports already populating and collecting data. So it can be really powerful for anyone, really.
With that being said, I'm quite conscious though that a lot of people, you know, they see Google Analytics, and that word analytics can often get them a little bit nervous, and they think, we need to be data mining, we need to be able to understand algorithms and all the rest of it. Is that true? Do you need to have a really comprehensive understanding of data and have that kind of mathematical hat on all the time, or is it something which almost anyone can jump into?
No, absolutely. I think it's something that anyone can jump into. The idea, you know, I touched on before saying that actually it's, you know, used by so many people and it's free, which means there's tons of resources out there for that. I think that really helps that learning. I'm not saying there's not a learning curve to utilize the platform to its full potential, because yeah, you can go quite advanced if you want to, but even some of the basic reports that it provides, they present it in a really easy and digestible way, and it kind of gives you some of the initial data that you might need at your fingertips. And actually, like across our business, we kind of encourage most people to feel comfortable enough to go into the platform and maybe understand or be able to pull some of the data themselves. So I would really recommend and suggest that actually I wouldn't restrict any one person or one team to have to be responsible for it. It's something that everyone, especially within digital marketing, should feel more than comfortable to go in the platform themselves, and kind of everyone wants it for their own question. And that's why I think if you can empower them to do that, that's probably the best thing.
Yeah. So with that being said then, I think it's important to kind of address the main objective of this short course then. Now, going into it, like I said, I'm really conscious that we're going to have a number of walkthroughs looking at the platform in particular. Are we expecting people to go through this short course in a few sessions in the next 2 weeks and come out and be the next Rachel McGuigan? Like, what are we trying to accomplish from this then?
I think really for me, the ideal would be, it's a big change, especially if you've lived in the world of universal analytics and now you're moving over. It's a big change in platform. So for me, it's hopefully empowering people to feel comfortable with the platform, understand basic navigation, and maybe how to sort of figure out where bits of data lies or the purpose of each section. And then after that, really, I guess it's more about that independent learning, you know, take it into the real world, into the examples that you need it for in your day-to-day sort of work environment, and then try and figure out how you sort of learn the nuances of it there and then. But ultimately, it's kind of that, like, hopefully a beginner's guide to just feeling comfortable with the platform.
Just to add on what you've said there, then I was going to signpost the learners to the additional resources section that you can see on this online learning platform. So with every session, you'll see an additional tab there named Additional Learning Resources or Additional Resources. If you click through, you'll find a number of links to podcasts, articles, and we're essentially signposting you to continue your learning independently beyond these sessions. So be sure to check those out as well. With that being said then, we've mentioned quite a lot about there being an existing Google Analytics and then Google Analytics 4 coming out, and there's going to be differences between those two. So what are some of the key differences between Universal Analytics and GA4?
So there's quite a lot. I suppose that's the easiest way to start. There is actually quite a lot. And I'm going to just pick a couple because I think you could go on forever. But ultimately, I think the differences will really just might be more specific cases and apply to you in your business. So I'll go for the ones that kind of apply to most. So the great place to start is data retention. In Universal Analytics, it was never a problem. Most people kind of said, like, I want my user data to stay forever. We know that Google Analytics 4 is really kind of, so I suppose, like, focusing on users' privacy, and that's sort of a bit more like future-proof in terms of that, the privacy part and being user-centric. So actually, by default, when you create an account, your user data only lasts for 2 months, and at a maximum, you can only change that toggle currently to 14 months. So that's a big change from being to have user data for however long you've had your account, whether that be, some accounts have had them 10 years versus 14 months. It's quite a big difference. So I'd say that's probably point number one for me. Point number two is like the fact that your dimensions and metrics in the platforms differ slightly and also are calculated slightly. So a lot of people have tried to do comparisons and say like for likes across the two platforms, but actually the figures can change across the two platforms. Also, if you've got historic reports that exist, that you maybe take to the board or you pass to your shareholders or whatever, or anything like that, any reports that you do for your business, you need to evaluate whether you can replicate the whole of that in GA4. It might not be possible. So understanding there's a difference between what data is available is really important. And then lastly, and hopefully what we showcase in the walkthroughs, is that the interface is quite different as well. The functionality that exists within the reports is different. The sort of transformations and interrogation that you can do is slightly different. And ultimately, the look and feel across the two platforms is different. The way they talk about things, the naming conventions of things, it's different. So there's a bit of learning to do. So it's slightly harder when you're I suppose in a way it's slightly harder when you're transitioning between the two, because actually you've got a whole brand new bit of learning to do, and you're trying to figure out where the old world now lives in the new world. So it makes it a little bit more tricky.
So Rachel, in terms of the short course then, how are we going to go about structuring this exactly?
Yeah, so I think we'll start by just trying to give you an overview of the most basic navigation that exists. It's like common across most of the features. So that's going to cover things like, how do you interact with the dates? How do you use the search to get more help? Things like that. So we'll cover the most common functionality that exists across the platform. And then we're going to break it out into some more in-depth walkthroughs across the 4 main areas that we've identified in the platform. So that covers reporting, explore, advertising and audiences, and then there is settings and integration. So we try to cover the other areas in a bit more detail to let you know how to interact with each area.
Sounds good. So should we jump straight into the basic functionality now then?
Yeah, that would be perfect. Today we're going to go over the key functionalities that exist within Google Analytics 4 to hopefully help enable you to use the reports to the best of your ability and to really dive into that data and understand what it's trying to show and ultimately get the most out of the platform. If you don't have a Google Analytics 4 account, as you can see, I'm currently using a demo account that exists for anyone with the ability to use Google Analytics. So it's really easy. Anyone can go in and have a look at this data. But if you do have your own account, then you can just use that as well to kind of get familiar with the platform. If we start at the top, we'll start with the search functionality. The idea being here that you can kind of get insights at the tip of your fingers. You can look at things that you can jump back into reports that you've recently viewed. You can deal with some of the intelligence that's available. So you can just click into these things and gain insights quite fast, or you can type in specific elements of the platform or questions, and it will try to surface you with the best results. So say, for example, if I wanted to type in e-commerce, you can see, for example, it pre-fills some examples. It tells me the volume of transactions that we've had. These little bars indicate these are preset reports, and then these question marks indicate support and help files that I can jump directly into to understand the data more. So this is quite a powerful tool in terms of being able to jump into some of that quick insight. Then as we come down, you've got the ability to add a comparison. So the idea here is that it slices the data and allows you to compare and contrast different types of audiences based on a range of conditions. So say, for example, the easiest example here would be able to pick, say, mobile devices. So if I searched for include dimension to be mobile and click OK, built that condition and press apply, you'll see it color coordinates it. And then as I scroll through the report, I can see clearly my two different audience groups and the difference in performance between the two. If I hover over it, I get different stats, etc., etc. So I've got a real clear understanding of the two differences of these audiences. If I head over to the right-hand side, what we have here is the date range. And again, you can kind of just pick from presets, or you can totally interact with this and pick your own. The only real downside here is that there is a time lag with Google Analytics 4, and so real insight from today is not always possible, so that's something to be aware of. And then you can also compare as well if you need to understand growth and things like that as a business. As we come further down, you've got the ability again to jump back into comparisons, to share the report if you want to do collaboration, make sure everyone's on the same page. Anyone who has access to your Google Analytics account will also be able to access that link and see the report that you're looking at. And then another quick way to jump back into the insight and that automated intelligence that the platform brings. You can also click into suggested questions, and you can go through these and start to see what questions are available to ask. So for example, on what days do I get the most users? And when we look at this, Thursday is the most popular day, Saturday and Sunday tend to be the most quieter days. But obviously, because this is a B2B sort of website, that's not really unexpected. And then you can also rate whether this answer was helpful or not, which is really interesting because not all of them really add value for your business. And I think sometimes you can get a bit bogged down by feeling like you need to do something about it because it's alerted it to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing to do for you and your business. All of these questions are just little tooltips. They help explain what the content means that bit further. And then these bubbles tend to be the most important because it tells you whether it's unsampled data or if there's a threshold applied. The threshold basically means that the data is being sampled because there's a minimum threshold that Google need to kind of protect that privacy of the individual. And so if it doesn't hit those thresholds and if it could be identifiable, they will sample it to avoid any issues like that. As you come further down, there are buttons into these reports. So if any graph or scorecard is taking an interest or you want to know more about it, there's a really quick link there to jump into the report further. And then as I scroll further down again, you've got the ability here on any grey arrow to change the metric or dimension that you're looking at. So for example, in this card, I actually can change from a preset amount of dimensions. So for example, if I was to change that to source, and I could see how that differs. Whereas on the card on the right here, I can actually change the metric to sessions or engaged sessions, as well as the dimension itself. So you've got a bit of flexibility there within the reports. However, you might need to go into an actual report to understand the data a bit further. So for example, if I jump into an actual tabularized report, there's still the basic functionality that we've kind of already touched on, which are things like the search, the comparison, your date range, etc. But there's some other additional functionality that we haven't yet spoke about. So for example, the ability to add a filter. So comparisons allow you to show you both sets of data and allow you to compare, whereas filter refines everything underneath and therefore only isolates it to you. So for example, again, if I took the mobile example and I pop that on, all of my data underneath is filtered for mobile. So for example, for this time range, you can see that new users in total is around 18,000. If I took off my filter now, you can see that jumps up to 41,000, hence explaining that all of that underneath is filtered. And I think one of the other things that I don't know if you sort of noticed there, but if I was to pop this back on, just to quickly show you, as you scroll down the page, it does alert you in the top that you have a filter in place and that you can remove it as well. So just be careful that you haven't left something filtered as you're pulling out your stats. And then as we get further down the page, you see you've got like basic functionality to extend the amount of rows or to toggle between the pages, or ultimately complete a search if you want to isolate that data down. So like for example, if I just wanted to know how organic was performing across all of the channels, I could search organic and then that isolates the table there for me. But if I take that off, you can see that again, I've got another grey arrow here that allows me to pick primary dimension. So what's the first thing I want to look at? So that might be channel. And then this little blue tick allows me to then go and add a secondary dimension to this. So for example, I might want to add a source into that. And then I can see for organic that most of that contribution comes from Google, whereas for organic search and Bing, actually the contribution of new users is a lot lower there. So secondary dimensions can be useful for digging that one bit further into the data. And then if I was to take that off just to kind of clean it up and make this a bit easier to read, you can hover under each of these metrics and it will tell you what that means, the definition and what the data is trying to show. And then you've still got the ability to filter and sort of sort the table by whatever dimension you want to. And then as you go further along to the end, you've got events and you've got conversions. And again, it's a similar thing here. So it's currently on all, but you can isolate that and pick a specific event that you want to analyze it as well. The only thing I would say on events is that clicks, scrolls and page views, all of those count as events. Everything is an event now, and therefore just looking at all events could be quite skewed because it doesn't necessarily mean it's driving the right type of engagement that you would want for your business. And then ultimately, similar to what we've saw in past platforms, you can isolate a conversion as well. So if I wanted to look at what platforms were driving purchases and the revenue that was attached to that, I can do that quite easily as well. And that is some of the key functionality you're going to need to know as you try to navigate through these reports.
So I think what we've been able to do there is essentially introduce the learners to GA4. Now I appreciate the whole title of this short course is an introduction to GA4, but like you said, subsequent sessions we will be doing a deeper dive into those 4 key areas. So I guess in terms of this session, what we've achieved, we've identified the main purpose of this short course, which is to provide an introduction of GA4 to learners and to enable digital marketers to utilize Google Analytics 4 to unlock insights and value. With that being said, that is the end of this session. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to you joining us in the next.